Welcome back to the Simmons Podcast. If this is your first time here, thank you for stopping by. I hope you enjoy the show and will continue to return for more episodes to come. Today, we will be chatting about what is the most famous paranormal report. I have been interested in the paranormal for years. I can't remember exactly when, but I can't recall the moment. It was years and years ago. I was laying in bed one night and I heard my grandmother call my name. And my grandmother had been passed away a couple of years at the time. So that is probably my very first paranormal experience. When I was growing up, when I was younger, there wasn't really many paranormal shows. Anything to do with the paranormal, ghosts, that type of stuff was something that no one really talked about. It was something that was kept secret, kept it to yourselves. You were crazy if you thought or talked about stuff like that. But now, today, we've got all kind of TV shows related to the paranormal. I think the first time that I seen a ghost show was about 2006, give or take some, and it was Talps, Ghost Hunters on the Sci-Fi Channel. This was back when Sci-Fi had actually spelt their name, SCIFI, or, something like that. If you're not sure what the show Ghost Hunters was about, it was back when it was Jason and Grant and Brian and all them were on it. Like I said, it was about a team called Talps. I believe it was called the Atlantic Paranormal Society or something like that. Stationed up in Rhode Island. And like I had mentioned, now there are tons of shows about ghosts, like a show called A Haunting, A Ghost Ruined My Life, Ghost Hunters, Most Terrifying Places. I can go on and on about all kind of paranormal shows. If you believe in the paranormal, what is the most famous reports you can think of? For me, I would say the Stanley Hotel in Colorado, Waverly Hills in Kentucky, the Queen Mary ship out in California, and of course, who cannot forget the Amityville house in New York. Well, for me, I'm going to say that the Amityville house would most likely be the one I would say is the most famous report. Maybe because it has a lot of coverage about it. I'm not too sure, but this is the one I'm going to go with. To me, it's one of the most famous reported haunted places. So here's a little backstory about that Amityville house up in New York, if you supposedly have not heard about it. So around 6:30 p.m. on November 13th, 1974, Ronald DeFeo, who was then 23, entered Henry's bar in Amityville, Long Island, New York, and declared, "You got to help me. I think my mother and father are shot." DeFaro and a small group of people went to his house, which was located near the bar, and found that the parents were dead inside the house. One of his friends that was in the group made a call to the police department, who searched the house and found that 6 members of his family were dead in their beds. On November 13th, 1974, Ronald DeFeo Jr. shot and killed 6 members of his family at 1112 Ocean Avenue. This is where it all starts for us. In court, DeFeo claimed that he killed his family in self-defense because he heard their voices plotting against him. He was convicted of second-degree murder in November 1975 and sentenced to 6 terms of 25 years to life in prison. DeFeo died in prison in March of 2021. In December of 1975, George and Kathy Lutz and their 3 children moved into the house. After 28 days, the Lutz fled the house, claiming to have been terrorized by paranormal phenomenon while living there. George and Catherine Lutz bought the house for what was considered to be a bargain price of $80,000. Now, if y'all seen pictures of this house, that's a good price. That's a good deal, because this house was it's amazing. The 5-bedroom house was built in Dutch colonial style and had a distinctive gable roof. It also had a swimming pool and a boathouse, as it was located on a canal. George and Catherine married in July of 75 and each had their own homes, but they wanted to start fresh with a new property. Kathy had 3 children from a previous marriage: Daniel, who was 9, Christopher, who was 7, and Melissa, or Missy, was 5. They also owned a crossbreed dog that was named Harry. During their first inspection of the house, the real estate broker told them about the murders and asked if they would be interested in buying the house and if that would affect their decision. After discussing the matter, they decided that it was not a problem. Much of the DeFeo family's furniture was still in the house because it was included for $400 as part of the deal. A friend of George, Lutz, learned about the history of the house and insisted on having it blessed. At the time, George was a non-practicing Methodist and had no experience of what this would entail. Catherine was a non-practicing Catholic and explained the process. George knew a Catholic priest named Father Ray, who agreed to carry out the house blessing. He arrived to perform the blessing while George and Catherine were unpacking their belongings on the afternoon of December 18th, 1975, and went into the building to carry out their rituals. When he flicked the first holy water and began to pray, he heard a muscular voice demanding that he get out. When leaving the house, Father Ray did not mention this incident to either George or Catherine. On Christmas Eve, 1975, Father Ray called George and advised him to stay out of the second floor room where he had heard the mysterious voice, the former bedroom of Mac and John Matthew, that Catherine planned to use as a sewing room, but the call was cut short by static. Following his visit to the house, Father Ray allegedly developed a high fever and blisters on his hands, similar to stigma. I'm not sure exactly how you say that. I'm not very good with these type of words. At first, George and Catherine experienced nothing unusual in the house. Talking about their experience, they reported that it was as if they were just living in a different house. Just explaining it off as, oh, the house is settling, the floor's creaking, it's, just your normal blowing it off type stuff when you move into a new house. By mid-January 1976, another attempt at a house blessing by George and Catherine, they experienced what would turn out to be their final night in the house. The Lutzes denied to give a full account of the events that took place on this occasion, describing them as too frightening. After getting in touch with Father Ray, the Lutzes decided to take some belongings and stay at Catherine's mother's house in nearby Deer Park, New York, until they can sort out the problems with the house. They claimed that the paranormal activity followed them there, with the final scene of greenish black slime coming up the staircase towards them. On the 14th of January 1976, George and Catherine Lutz, with their 3 children and their dog, left 1112 Ocean Avenue, leaving all of their possessions behind. The next day, a mover arrived to remove the possessions to send to the Lutzes. He reported no paranormal phenomenon while he was inside the house. 5 months after the Lutzes family left, Fred and Lorraine Warren arrived at the home to conduct an investigation into what had tormented the family. According to the Warrens' case files, Ed was physically pushed to the ground, and Lorraine felt a deep sense of something demonic in the home and was overcome with visions of the DeFaro family bodies laying on the floor. The Warrens also captured a photo of a demon child standing in the home's basement. They determined there were demonic forces at work in the home. The Lutz family ultimately sold the property and moved to California. The Warrens are best known for their involvement in the 1975 Amityville horror. The Lutz claimed that their house was haunted by a violent demonic presence so intense that it eventually drove them out of their home. The Amityville horror conspiracy authors Stephen and Roxanne can't say their last name, Kaplan, something like that, characterized the case as a hoax. Lorraine Warren told a reporter for the Express Times newspaper that the Amityville horror was not a hoax. The reported hauntings were the basis for the 1977 book The Amityville Horror and adopted into the 1979 and 2005 films of the same name, while also serving as an inspiration for the films that followed. There is even a picture that was taken that shows a boy in the doorway that is believed to be Little John. The photo was allegedly taken inside the Amityville house in 1976. It has become one of the most famous paranormal photos of all time. It features what appears to be a young boy with white eyes who is peeking out of the doorway. George Lux revealed that Amityville Ghost Boy photo to Merv Griffin show back in 1979, 3 years after it was taken. The image was supposedly captured by Gene Campbell, a professional photographer who was part of the team who worked with the paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. Gene had set up an automatic camera that took infrared pictures to capture the second floor landing during the night. It clipped with black and white film. His camera captured the Amityville Ghost Boy photo that some have speculated could be the ghost of the murdered child John DeFaro, who had lived in the house with his family prior to the Luxes. The debate continues concerning the accuracy of the Amityville horror. The various owners of the house since 1976 have publicly reported no problems while living there. A man named James bought the house in 1976 and lived there with his wife Barbara for 10 years. He commented, "Nothing weird ever happened except for people coming by because of the book and the movie." So, after hearing the backstory, the best that I could tell it, what do you think? Do you think it's haunted? Or do you think it was just a whole bunch of nonsense to make money off of the story that Ronald DeFaro claimed to hear voices in the house, claiming that the house might have been haunted? Well, for me, it's hard to say. I will say that yes, it is haunted until there is proof that it was all faked. And if it was, then what about the Warrens and all their other cases? You know, it's a hard thing because the Warrens are well known for their paranormal investigations, like The Conjuring, the Annabelle doll, that type of stuff. But as far as the Amityville house, you know, hauntings, they come and go. So, like I said, it's hard to say. You know, the Lutzes and the Pharaoh, you know, they could have possibly been seeing and hearing things and having this experience. And then when the new people came in, you know, it could have succeeded. It could have just went away. Maybe the house blessing did something and it just took a minute for it to subside and completely vanish. You know, the paranormal world, it's got a lot of ups and downs in it. People can say, oh, you faked this, you faked that, which is, you know, true. People can. So you got to take it with a grain of salt when you're watching stuff on TV and taking somebody's word about the paranormal. Unless you really had the experience firsthand, it's kind of hard. So yeah, I guess, you know, falling back on my interest in the paranormal, one of my very first investigations when I was investigating the paranormal, me and my team went to this house in Somerville, Alabama, where we was living at the time. A long story short, we set up a camera and audio in this one bedroom. Our camera was set up beside me. The light on it was, because I was doing a little interview, it was getting bright and dimming, getting bright and dimming. and I asked the question, are you trying to use the light to manifest yourself? And the person I was talking to at the time wanted to understand what that meant. So I gave her this long, drawn-out explanation, and we went on. The next day, when we were reviewing our evidence, we heard a little voice say, "Make her feel she's dumb." So that's kind of my first real experience with the paranormal, besides hearing my grandmother's voice calling my name years before. So, let's fall back on the main question. What's the most famous paranormal report that you know of? Is it the Amityville Horror House? Or the Stanley Hotel? Or Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Kentucky? You know, I would love to, hear what you have to say on this subject. So, leave me some feedback. If you're on YouTube, in the comments below, leave it there. If you're listening to the podcast on some other platform, I'm not sure exactly what platform you're on, so I'm sure there's ways of giving us feedback on that. Or if you are on the other platforms, jump over to YouTube. The YouTube channel is also called the Simmons Podcast. So, yeah. As we come to the end of the show, we hope that you enjoyed this podcast. If you have, like I just said, comments, or if you want to suggest something, feel free to comment and let us know. We would like to remind you to like, subscribe, follow, or whatever you do to keep track of when we release our new shows. And like always, as Jim Carrey says in The Truman Show,
in case I don't see ya, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Until next time, guys, thanks so much for tuning in.